Welcome to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, where we explore leadership principles through the lens of the beautiful game.
Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and I got with me here Paul Jobson, my co-host and brother-in-arms, as we get to explore some really cool things in the world of soccer, the world of leadership, and how it all comes together. Paul, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Phil. It's great to be back on the pod again, and I'm super excited, obviously, about our guest today and what we're going to learn from just a wealth of knowledge and experience that we can all learn from. So I'm excited, man. But I'm doing well. The Jobson household is plugging away through the fall here. Some cooler weather in Texas, which means we're sub 90, so we're excited about that. But how are things with you, Phil? How are things with the fam? What's going on?
It's just a, whirlwind in the dark house as always. My daughter flew to Kona on Thursday to be part of the YWAM DTS stuff, and then she'll go somewhere in the world and just going out there sharing the gospel, and so that's she's doing that, and got a daughter who's recovering from a collarbone break, and another one who's trying to get her driver's license. So that's just the normal course of business here in the dark house. But I'm more excited. We're gonna get right to it today because I have basically, speaking of the dark house, pretty much a member of our family, Horst Richardson. He's my part of my wife's family, and at Colorado College he coached there for 50 years, coached the men's program there. And just an amazing story that we get into. And so, as you talked about, Paul, just a wealth of knowledge, experience to be able to share with us so we can hear all about how he was able to teach leadership through the game and also teach the game in an amazing way. So, Horst Richardson, how are you today?
Well, I am fine. Here, too, the temperature is going down. Unlike Texas, where sub-90s is great, this is sub-70s. So we're at 68 this morning, and it's invigorating.
Yeah.
That's winter coat weather in Texas, just so you know. We'd have our big coats on.
We're just having short sleeves.
Yeah, it's parka weather in Texas, and it's shorts and T-shirts in Colorado Springs. So
it's sub 90, and I've got long sleeves on. And you're sub 70 with short sleeves.
So, and I have my Colorado College polo shirt here, which is another fun story that I found it at TJ Maxx about 10 minutes from my house here in Northern California. Oh. Yeah, so you don't see that very often, but it was pretty cool. I had to grab it, of course, because it was on the rack here in my hometown here. So that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about much more important things than the weather and where I got my golf shirt. So, Horst, we always love just starting with your story. So can you just briefly share your story? I know brief is a hard word when you're talking about 50 years coaching for a school, but just really how you developed your passion for soccer. I mean, growing up in Germany, passion for soccer and football, obviously in Europe, leadership, coaching, and what you're up to today.
Sure. Well, yes, I'm an immigrant. I came to this country in 1955 as the adopted son of an American soldier who married my mother, a war widow. I was born in 1941. So I'm sort of in the octogenarian category now, enjoying retirement. I grew up in a soccer family, but I didn't really know that till I was, 10, 11, 12 years old, because my father had been killed in the war. My grandfather was in the prisoner of war camp. I grew up with my grandmother and my mother. So there weren't very many men in the family. But when Grandpa came back from POW camp, it became clear quickly that he was involved with a local village soccer club in Bavaria, close to my hometown of Nuremberg, president of the soccer club. And, so I attended numerous adult games, village soccer, nothing earth-shaking. But I think the defining moment in my initial love for the game came in 1954, when glued to the radio in my grandparents' apartment, I listened to the World Cup final between West Germany and Hungary, right? Mm-hmm. Which the Germans won against all odds, 3-2. And, all of a sudden, soccer was in the news, and it was very important for the German psyche, to have made this World Cup splash. So somebody gave me a wallet for my birthday, I guess my 13th birthday, And I kept all the clippings of these heroes of mine in my wallet. Then early in 55, my stepfather, Walter Richardson, decided to take the whole family back to his country, the United States. And we ended up in California, where nobody at that time really had heard of soccer. But in 8th grade, there was a PE segment on kickball, right? And I mean, it must have been a week or two. And, having just arrived as a foreigner and then as a, member of the former enemy, and having a strange name like Horst, first name that nobody could identify with, I was not exactly, in the midst of things. But after that kickball session, where I kind of balanced the ball on my head and I started doing a few things and played and dribbled and shot, I was in. I mean, that gave me access to the community, right? Well, that didn't last very long because it was only a 2-week segment, but I had set my mark. And then not until college, University of California, Riverside, where I got my BA, where they did have a soccer team, and which I joined, did I explore soccer again on a serious basis. And, it was such a low key program, right? That a couple of the players who didn't have shin guards, they put Life magazines in their socks, to play with against any kind of physical infractions. And I never forget that. We played, might have been against Biola or a local opponent, where one of their players, who was a foreign student from Peru, played the whole game barefooted. Can you believe that? He played barefooted, and he was so fast and fleet-footed, nobody could catch him, right? So then in 1965, I got a job at Colorado College. It had nothing to do with soccer. It was simply a 1-year substitute position teaching in the German department here at Colorado College. And, while I was grading papers one early September afternoon, I heard kids running around on the fields outside of my apartment. I looked out and they were playing soccer, and I was just dumbfounded, had no idea that, they had this activity at the college. I went down there and started kicking the ball around, and they wanted me to join them on the team. And I said, well, I think I'm not eligible because I'm actually, an instructor here. Oh, gee, that's too bad, And then, to make a long story short, the then coach, Bill Boddington, who was only connected to the college because his son was on the team, he was a businessman in town. He basically said, listen, I really don't want to coach my own son. If you want to do it, it's yours. And it was a handshake, right? So that's how I got into coaching at Colorado College. And then the 1-year job turned into a 10-year position. That's a long story in itself. But, I was a faculty member, and my sort of adjunct responsibilities over time became the soccer team. But then as time progressed, I fell more and more in love with the soccer end of things than with the academic faculty end of things. And juggled those two positions over time till my retirement. So I taught German for 45 years and I coached soccer for 50. And, we're an integral part of the college still, and are looking forward to homecoming, which begins this Friday, actually. So lots of things to do.
Yeah, and it's a cool thing. 50 years, that's insane. We know we could talk for days and days and days. In fact, there's this book here. It's the history of men's soccer at Colorado College, 1950 to 2015, that you and Helen, your wife, wrote and put together. And I haven't read the entire thing. As you see, it's a treatise here, but I have read quite a bit of these stories, and it's story after story after story. So if this thing's here, we know we could go for days and days and days talking about these things. We don't have that time.
I got it right here.
Look at that. You got it right there, too. Hey, we can do me right there. Boom. Paul, you don't
Hold
have
on,
your
let me
copy.
see. Let me see. Oh wait, I don't have that one. Nobody sent me that book. Hey,
We'll get it to you.
I guess I'm gonna have to
get you
go
one.
online.
Just
We'll
send
get
me the
We'll get you one. We'll get you one, Paul. So, but, part of the women's program, I have, of affinity. My wife played there as did three of her sisters. And that's a whole nother story that you were a part of there, Horst, and just been part of our family. I've been very grateful to get to know you and get to marry into it, really. And just blessed by that. And I know you've taught, a lot of leadership through what you're doing. There's also a cool little story that you have if you walk into the entryway of the Richardson home there in Colorado Springs, you basically see a history museum of the Colorado College men's soccer program as well. And in there is also, there's literally a picture of every team that you coached, which is amazing. And there's also a little picture there that has you with a prominent figure of the soccer world over the years, a little known Brazilian player that you have a picture with him. Can you just share that story? You got to share a stage with Pele at some point.
Well, yeah, that was at a soccer convention of the then National Soccer Coaches Association of America, at a convention in, I think it might have been Philadelphia, I can't remember exactly, but Pele was the honored guest, and I had received a letter of commendation for my activities in the association, my services that I rendered to them, and Pele was going to present me with that certificate on stage, right? And I mean, he was exactly my age. He was born in 41 as well. So we shook hands. I was actually on my way to teach German for my German students in Germany. We had a semester abroad program. And, so it was a quick stop over. But just to be in the presence of this gentle giant, being able to shake his hand, embrace him, hear him, tell the story or tell the audience that, love is the essential element in your communication in the world. And he used that word extensively. He just exuded he exuded this presence, that anyone who was in his immediate vicinity, could sense how his life in soccer had made him an icon. I mean, not just for, his own team or his country, but for the world,
Mm-hmm.
And you felt so humbled to be in his presence because of his inherent grace. I mean, it was an overwhelming experience, and extremely memorable. Yes, and I I have that picture right in that trophy room, as it were.
Yeah, I know my son was pretty blown away by it. Justin, my 11-year-old, when he got to come, we visited you guys a few months ago. He was excited. Yeah. So one last thing before we get into the leadership stuff. I know right now you're working on a project. I know you're really excited about because you shared it with me. It's pretty darn cool. You had an opportunity back in the 70s, right, to video some soccer games or football games and World Cups games. So that's that project you're working on now, just to show you do not stop when it comes to being part of this game. Like, just because you retired from coaching, share what you're doing now with these Super 8. And explain what a Super 8 is for our younger audience. Paul probably doesn't know.
Well, I mean, the younger audience who just goes around with this device, right, and documents events on video, may not know that this wasn't always the case, right? I mean, there were times when you carried a movie camera around, and documented, camping trips or international trips, or for that matter, soccer activities. And I think, Phil, what you're referring to is our recent attempt to transfer thousands and thousands of feet of Super 8 film, 16,000 feet to be exact.
Wow.
That's several miles. That's several miles of Super 8 movie tape into digital form, into DVDs. And a big part of that footage is, in fact, soccer material. Before we get into this more in greater detail, I really have to give credit to my wife, Helen, who shot innumerable videos of home games over time at Colorado College, carrying, super VCR cameras on her shoulder, standing on a ladder, to get a little bit of elevation above the field. But these Super 8 movies document some games as early as in the 60s here on campus. But I think, let me focus my comments on the 1974 World Cup, which was held in Germany. I had spent a semester teaching in Germany ahead of the summer competition, and then stayed for the summer with an acquaintance in my village, and was able to go to a few games. But I sat in front of the TV there for hours and hours on ends and videotaped, critical games off of the German television, hoping to use that material when I got back, as instructional material for my own team. And so, these Super 8 films had lain dormant for decades in the basement of the house here. And, a quaint coincidence allowed me to contact a contractor with whom now we're doing some editing and converting these films to digital form. But yeah, it's just, me sitting in front of West German TV, taking Super 8 movies of the television reviews of, important goals and plays and saves and celebrations, brought back streams of memories, and I couldn't believe that we still, have this in a form that is viewable. Yeah. But I didn't use these films in 74 and 75 for instructional material, because the coverage of soccer in this country at the time, certainly where we live, was minimal, and occasionally, an article in the paper about some big event. But the players really appreciated, having sort of firsthand coverage of that World Cup, even though most of them, didn't see any of it, right? And I mean, there were heroes there that, from Beckenbauer to Müller, the goal scorer, or Sepp Maier, the German keeper, that brought back all of these emotions, when finally the Germans beat the Dutch in the final. But yeah, I am hoping that one of these days I can maybe have a mini convention in the house with some of the players from 74 and 5, and we can see these again. And I say, now, what did you guys learn from those?
That's funny. Yeah, and that's the old school film sessions, right? Yeah, we don't have the on-demand everything now with the video, different angles of our own games and every other game that's played in the world. That's amazing. Paul, would that be a little different than what you did with your teams?
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking, like, probably so far ahead of your time. What other coaches probably during the mid 70s were showing, World Cup matches to their teams, or even had the ability to do that? So ahead of your time. And to flip back to Pele for a minute, it is amazing to me that a player like that, the longevity of his excellence on the field just surpasses time. My 10-year-old son has a poster of Pele on his wall and loves Brazil because of Pele, who he never saw play, knows older men in his life that played against Pele, things like that. But it's just cool to me. And then for you to hear firsthand experiences of people like yourself who just can attest to the genuineness of the man that we all think he is amazing. Because there's so many athletes now that are going to have great careers, but you wonder what they're really like, So I love that story, and I'm blown away by his greatness to this day. Still, I think probably one of the best players ever to play the game.
Exactly. And he should have run for president, in Brazil. I mean, there's an election, I think today, right?
Yeah.
In Brazil, or it was yesterday, two politicians from extreme ends of the political spectrum. I think Pele should have run, as a middle of the roader, he would have won.
Yeah, he would have won by a landslide probably, but because of his personality, that's why he's not in politics, right? I would assume. So, but Horst, again, just ahead of your time with the video thing is amazing to me, having been a coach not nearly as long as you've been a coach. But I know being a coach, some of the best experiences are with your players, and I can tell just from the little bit that I'm knowing of you in this interview, with the book and the stuff you did with your players with the video and all the different things. Are there a couple of moments over, 50 years, how in the world do you pick out one or two, but are there a couple of moments over your coaching career that just stand out to you that they're just so memorable that you could share with us as a coach?
Well, there are about 435 stories in this book that, the book, by the way, is based on stories and tall tales and memories from players and friends of the program, not necessarily just,
Mm-hmm.
records and highlights of scores. And we have that as well, of course. But, Helen and I just bought a new television set, a smart TV. We haven't ever had a smart TV. So we just bought a new set because we want to enjoy watching the World Cup from gutter in November. And the technicians, the geek squad from Best Buy came over to help us set this up. And I was afraid that I would be losing my ability to, view some of these old VHS tapes from the 70s, 80s, 90s that we've got stacked downstairs through my VCR video deck, the tape deck. And so finally they, hooked up adapters and things and the system worked. And so Helen said, well, let's see what kind of quality we get out of this new TV. And we put in the 1992 highlight tape. 1992 was probably the best team we ever had, Final Four team from here. And we enjoyed watching the incredible highlights of that particular year. And so let me just focus on a couple of stories from that particular year. We were selected. We went out to the West Coast and played 2 games, survived those. And we traveled 10,000 miles to get to the Final Four, from where we are, West Coast. And the second round was in St. Louis at Wash U. And the athletic director was along, right? Max Taylor, to, compliment the team. And we had scored, it was a 1-0 game. And the last 15 minutes, were so intense. I mean, one corner kick after another against us, fabulous goalkeeper, dynamic defense. The AD, the athletic director, couldn't stand it anymore, staying and watching. He had to leave. He left the stadium and paced around the outside till the game was over. The intensity level was so great that he thought that he couldn't survive staying. On the other hand, when we were in the first round going out to California, here's a human interest story that kind of defines, the liberal arts process here at Colorado College. On that team were 3 All-Americans. And one of them was Noah Epstein, a forward, a striker who had, entertained us with incredible competitive play. But in the middle of the season, he got hurt and had a knee issue that needed to be addressed. So we were without him for much of the season. And, I met him on occasions down in the rehab room, and he was on a bicycle working out. And I said, Noah, you need to get involved in some other extracurricular activity to get your mind off, your not being able to play with the team. And so, as an English major and a handsome looking fellow, he tried out for a play, which the drama department was putting on for their fall show. And it happened to be Romeo and Juliet. And, guess who got the part of Romeo? It was Noah Epstein, right? And so he was in rehearsals and started to play on the team again. And he was just a happy, happy camper. But we made the playoffs, and the show opened up the same day that we were to play the first, playoff game out in California. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday show, and we were playing Friday, Sunday out in California. So what do, right? How how to deal with the drama department, to release him from his stage appearance. And so we came up with a compromise to encourage him to do the Friday night show at Colorado College, and after that, fly him out early Sunday morning to play with us at a noon game at Claremont College, and then speed him back to a plane to get him back to Colorado College for a Sunday night. The drama department had moved the Sunday afternoon show to Sunday night to accommodate us. And had it not been for my wife, Helen, to deliver him to the local airport and pick him up from the local airport, he would have never made it. And probably, the drama department would have been our enemy forever. But it worked out. And of course, he assisted on the winning goal, right? So, I mean, what an incredible story, right? And so Noah actually was in town not too long ago with his wife and daughter, Izzy, who may be applying to Colorado College and come here in the fall, and so the enjoyment that my wife and I have had over the years, our relationships with these sons of ours, if you will, and there are hundreds of them, is when they do come to town, when they give us a call, when they announce the birth of their second child, when they want to have us host somebody who's coming to look at Colorado College. That gives us, incredible enjoyment. We were at a soccer game yesterday here, watched the men play, and I turn around and there is Brian Swiegel, right, who played for me in 2000. There he is with his two little girls, came down from Denver to watch the game. He says, "Hey, coach, haven't seen you in a while. How are things going?" And, those kind of things keep the heart warm and the body young, and so that's really the incredible satisfaction I get from, my connection with the old group.
That's awesome. I think you kind of answered probably my next question just right there. I mean, would you say that's your favorite part of being a coach? It's not the X's and the O's, it's the relationships. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what would you say? Is that your favorite part of being a coach over 50 years?
Well, and not just the relationships after retirement, but I mean, all the relationships that you build, during the season. I mean, to be successful, and we can get into defining success maybe at a later moment here, but to be successful, you have to have buy-in from your team, right? You have to build trust. You have to delve into their lives, understand how complicated, how difficult it is, to grow up in today's world. Colorado College has a tradition that prior to preseason, we do 4 days of volunteer work somewhere, in the Southwest. And I had established a connection with the Taos Pueblo in New Mexico through a former player. In fact, it was that goalkeeper from the 92 team who ended up being an activity director, sports activity director for the Taos Pueblo. And for, maybe 4 or 5 years, we went down there, camped, and helped, work on their infrastructure in rather, difficult, physically taxing conditions. And you could build some esprit de corps, as they were sweating along, maybe fixing a roof or painting a house or working in a greenhouse. And of course, I could observe who was working and who was sloughing, and, kind of get an impression of how the group might gel, where the leadership might come from internally. And so those were special moments. to work hard in difficult conditions and then come back to campus, and transfer that energy to workout sessions and then eventually meaningful games.
Yeah, those experiences can be transformational, not just for a team as a whole, but individuals as well. And I'm sure through your career, I mean, obviously in the little bit of time that I had the pleasure of coaching college soccer, some of the coolest things we're seeing those transformational moments in a kid's life where you think this kid's never going to get it, and at some moment something snaps. And you're like, and then when they're done 10 years later, you're like, wow, that I remember when you couldn't tie your shoe, or I mean, I didn't think you were going to make it out of college, and look what you've accomplished now. I'm sure you've got thousands of stories like that as well with kids that you just kind of took under your wing and said, okay, I'm going to invest a ton into this just because that's what we do as coaches.
Well, I mean, we have probably more than a professor in a class. We have, as coaches, the ability to touch someone, in a meaningful way and direct him into an avenue of development that, eventually will assist him to become a productive citizen. And my unique position at Colorado College, being both a faculty member and a coach, allowed me to identify with them in their academic life, as well as their athletic progresses in their various sports. And on occasions, I would actually have a player in a German class, right? And then, we would kid around on the field, and they'd have a few German phrases that they would throw around to impress me, and maybe give them an extra brownie point in class. But yeah, and what we did do with my teams over time, and Phil knows this, we had probably 8 to 10 international trips during my career. We went to China with the team in 1988, a year before Tiananmen Square, right?
Wow.
We went to Brazil, we went to Europe often, right? We went to Ukraine a couple of years ago, and Poland. And that extension of the ability to meet and greet the world through our game is an invaluable educational experience, right? And gosh, there are just so many stories just from those international trips. We never lost anybody. We never left anybody behind, but twice we almost, I got to tell you this one. Nedim Ogelman, who was a player, he actually was a foreign student from Turkey who became a U.S. citizen and ended up working for the CIA. I mean, that's a great story in itself. But we were on the Yangtze River, right, on a river cruise going to Wuhan and, ending up at the great big Yangtze Dam. But going through the gorge, we stopped occasionally. It was just a regular commuter boat with probably 200 passengers, and we were just on there. And the boat would stop at some town of 2 million people, and didn't have a name that we would remember. But the guys wanted to get out and jog a little bit, or get some fresh air. And so we land at this particular town. The boat ties up. There are probably 100 steps leading up the embankment to the city square, and 4 guys decide, we're going to go for a jog. And I said, listen, make sure you take your watch. You got to be back by such and such a time. The boat leaves, right? And so they have shorts on, no shirts, right? Just jogging shoes and their watch. And Nedim had, what a Walkman is? Remember?
Oh yeah.
We're putting your earbuds, right? And off they go, right? Well, 3 of them come back at the appointed time, but Nedim isn't among them, right? Where's Nedim? Well, we were jogging through here and there, and all of a sudden he was gone in the crowd, right? And he probably stopped at some market, or wanted to take a look at something, and he was gone. No passport, no identifications, nothing, no wallet, right? I mean, the sailors, the boatmen, literally were casting off the ropes, that tied the boat to the moorings, when Nedham appeared way up on top of the walkway, and the whole team was there on the railing, come on, Nedham, and he ran and ran and ran and hurled himself on the boat as it was shoving off. And he says, well, I just got lost. And so how did you make it? Well, he stood in the middle of the square and he pumped his arm. He said, toot, 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 and some guy on a little motorcycle and a scooter, he said, oh yeah, okay, and got him to the dock, right? He might have been there still if he didn't have that, sensibility to use his communication skills, nonverbal, to get back to safety. But yeah, I mean, there are lots of stories that, allow for evening conversations with these guys when they come and visit. And some of them will do that next week during homecoming.
I absolutely love that. What I love about it is, like, we have story after story after story, and very few of them even mention the field and doing things on the field, and what formation or what this goal was, or what this. I mean, there are a couple I've heard of, maybe one assist that you mentioned, but that's what's so cool about coaching. I mean, we all love coaching for so many different reasons. One of the things that you did that I don't know that a lot of coaches do. I often refer to you as the Mr. Miyagi of soccer coaching, because you also had your players as team bonding and team building events, of course, help you with the home project. You said, hey, here's my nice new deck that my team built, or here's, the back chicken coop, or whatever it may be. And, you had these, and other than free labor, which we know is never a bad thing. But I know that's not the purpose you had behind those projects. What was those purposes of those projects, those home projects you had your teams come and do in your backyard and different places around your house?
Well, just to clarify, it was employment rather than free labor. Right?
Okay. Employment. So, there we go. You get them to.
It was not exploitation.
I didn't know that part. I didn't say exploitation. I didn't say that word. I never said anything about exploitation.
So, well, yeah, I mean, they helped to build a number of things around here, including the sunroom, and it was sort of a compliment to the academics to come over here and engage in some vocational activity, right? I mean, how many of them had ever swung a sledgehammer, right? Or run a saw, electric saw, or, put in solar panels, set posts in concrete, right? And so during block breaks, especially, we have these 4-day breaks, Paul, in our academic schedule here at Colorado College. Those of them who weren't traveling or, hiking in the mountains could come by and said, okay, well, we really wanted to put up solar panels because that's an environmentally friendly thing to do. And so, 3 of them came over and helped dig ditches to the freestanding poles and install, the electric feeder lines from the garage to the source of the energy, and worked hard. Helen fed them well, and they went home with a few dollars in their pocket. And it inspired some of them, to summer jobs. I mean, working construction, doing physical labor. And in fact, one of the guys who helped me install those solar panels now has a solar business, right? And enjoys what he does, and on occasions refers to me as the guy who got him into the job, So a little bit of that helped along the way. And I think they enjoyed the physical labor as a pause, from their activities in the classroom, and it was kind of rejuvenating, right? And they probably learned something along the way too,
Yeah, no, and that's what I love about this is just the idea that you as a coach didn't stop at the field. You said, hey, I want to teach these boys about life, these young men, these men about life and different aspects of life. One of the things that, as I was walking out the door this morning, Becca reminded me that when you went on those 10,000-mile trips, she had mentioned, this is what my wife remembers of it, is that you you didn't have air conditioning or often would cut the air conditioning because it was more fuel efficient. And you wanted to make sure to have the efficiencies to be able to teach the frugality to the kids too about, hey, how to do life, in ways that are efficient and effective. And also, so that was, those different things that are there that are part of the coaching. It's not just about, and that's what we talk about on the show. It's not, at the end of the day, it's about soccer, but it's about so much more than that. And, and that's what I want to get into next is just really how did you define success when you were coaching, and what were 1 to 2 things that you hoped every player would learn during their time playing with you?
Well, let's make a transition from the frugality comment that you just made to that particular point. I mean, I was born in the middle of World War II,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up after the war in, an environment where it was there difficult to survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my mother, reminded me as I grew up that, you've got to be grateful for the few things that are granted to you, from food to opportunity and occasion in education, jobs, and work your way up the ladder of success. So when I first started at Colorado College in '65, I was sort of the age of the players. I was like their brother, and then with the progressive time, I became their father. And at the end, I probably was their grandfather, So, there were different generational gaps that I tried to fill as best as I could. But in order to build a team where you have mutual trust and where you have, buy-in, where I know them and they know me, and neither one of us has, a fake persona to play, but we're honest with one another. It takes a little bit of time, and it's a process that has to be replayed every year. And I mean, my approach always was, at teachable moments, take a guy aside and say, well, how's your family doing? I mean, what's the latest with your dad, right? Or, I hear your mother might have had, an operation or something. I mean, some kind of connecting point on a human level that allowed them to engage in a meaningful conversation between two individuals, right? And so, I'll give you an example. I was never in the Army or the service, but when I was a paper boy in California, age 14, I won a 3-week stay at Camp Pendleton with the Marines, because I sold more subscriptions than anybody else in my neighborhood. So I got a 3-week stay at Camp Pendleton, and I played Marine, right? We were, in the tanks and the vehicles, and marched, and got up at 4:00 in the morning and did push-ups, things like that, right? But there was a drill sergeant who taught me a wonderful lesson that I used when we were on away trips with the team, and say you'd have to have a team meal somewhere, right? And everybody was hungry, right? And the lesson was that officers eat last, right? That the grunts would get to the food line first, right? And it was very hard for the assistant coach to accept, who was young and hungry as well. But I said, now you got to let these guys eat first, and then we're last in line, right? And we organized the whole thing. And it was, not a big deal, but it was kind of subtle. And I think the boys recognized that we care, right? And I think that it's just a small example of, how you extend, your love for them in a minimal way that might have an effect over time. And then, they trust you for saying, well, we got to do this and we got to do that to win the game, or to succeed, or to survive, right? Or to hang on. And most of the time, I think I was able to succeed in those endeavors. But you have to you have to invest emotionally in your charges, in your players to, get maximum achievement out of them on the field of play.
I'm a big fan of that, Horst. I appreciate you saying that. I think there's probably some coaches that are listening to this that maybe have lost sight of that a little bit in the challenge to win the next game or win the championship, and losing sight of the little pieces that actually help you achieve that, which is exactly what you're speaking to, even to the point of spending most of their time pouring into the best players, right? It's easy to be attracted to the best player, but in my opinion, and I want your opinion on this too, is my opinion is the players that don't play a lot that win you championships, and you have to invest in them to make them feel like they're part of this process also.
Listen, I got a story for you about that. Okay. I don't know, it's probably on page 220 of the book. So in the mid 80s, we had excellent squad, right? We had probably playoff appearances 3-4 years in a row. And a core part of that winning effort was a black player named Jacques Lemvaux. Jacques Lemvaux was originally from Zaire. He went to Belgium. He joined the U.S. Army. He came to Fort Carson in Colorado Springs for a summer soccer tournament that they had inter-service tournaments. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, you gotta come and watch this guy play." The friend actually being, the coach of the Army team. And I was so impressed with this individual because, not only because of his playing ability, which was obvious from the beginning, but after the game, I met him and, he spoke 4 languages. He spoke French from Zaire, German, because he learned that, and Swahili, and then, of course, English in the Army. And he was an outstanding dancer. He was, an artist. He painted. He showed me his pictures. I went to the admission office and I said, even though it's August, we've got to get this guy. It's unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. And the then sort of admission, whom I knew well, and my ability as a faculty member to go in there and say, this would enhance the entire campus community. We got to take Jacques. And they did. And he came. And it was clear from the beginning, he was a star without question. And the soccer field, Phil, as you know, is located north of Washburn Field, which then was the football field, right? We don't have football anymore, but then football was a big deal. And Jacques would come out from the locker room and juggle the ball the length of the football field. And sometimes when he felt like it, he would take a football, right, and place it on the 40-yard line, the 50-yard line, 55-yard line, and he'd kick field goals, right? And the coaching staff of the football team would drool, right? And they'd want Jacques to just be the place kicker, right? And Jacques would look at them. He had these tribal marks on his cheeks, from his home country. And he says to the football coach, "Coach, soccer is my life. Right? Soccer is my life," right? And he would stride off, princely, as it were. Well, he was a star, but, he had his issues, right? He knew he was a star, and so he wanted, special benefits. And that became kind of apparent with the team. And, you have to be very careful to treat everybody, the same way. And so one day we were going away on a away trip. Bus is ready to go. Jacques not there, right? And we had a rule, 5 minutes, maybe 10, and the bus leaves. And the bus left, and he wasn't on the bus. And we went down to New Mexico, played the game, and tied one and lost another one. And he could have probably helped us win them both, but that was a lesson both for the team and for him, right? And then for the rest of the season, I think things went, amiably, and we persevered. But he's an unforgettable character, right? And after he left Colorado College for years, he would send me his poetry, right? He would send me poems for Easter or for the holidays, and then I lost sight of him, and he never reappeared. I mean, he's gone. I have no idea where he is.
Wow.
But just maybe a handful who kind of are in that category. all the rest of them we keep track of, but Jacques Lembeau was like a shooting star. He came through and, he lit up the campus, and then he's gone, never to be seen again. So I would never forget him, though.
Yeah. So Horst, we're hitting the hour mark, so we are going to come to wrap this guy up. I just love. I mean, we could tell story after story after story. What I love more than anything is just you remember these players like it was yesterday, and you're talking about over 50 years, and these are. I was kind of doing the math on it, and that's a whole lot of players. I mean, if you're just saying, I know it's more than this, but even if it's just 20, that's 1,000 players that, as you said, your sons, and I know there's more than that, so. Awesome. Just so cool. So cool. And that's what I strive for as a coach, is to be able, and I remember, I just have a lot less years, and sometimes with names, I struggle. And so the fact that you know that with 50 years of names, I love it. I love it. Because that just speaks to you and how you coached and what kind of coach you are. It wasn't about it was about teaching them about life. And so with that, I know I'm going to turn it back on you and say, you played the game, you coached the game. What are some of the lessons you learned directly from the game, maybe just one or two, that you used in your marriage with Helen and in your parenting with Eric and Stacia, and now with your grandkids that you have?
Well, you coach the game, you are preparing the team for an event, competition, struggle, competition where you exhaust yourself, where you become emotionally involved, where you lose sight of things, where you become angry, where you tackle somebody unfairly and you should have never done it, where you accuse the referee of giving you a bad call. It's the heat of the moment. I mean, you have your family at home, you might get into an argument with your wife. Maybe your kids are not doing what you expect them to do. And so, you're confronted with tackling issues that need to be settled, right? I mean, maybe there needs to be a compromise. Maybe you need to be more patient and understanding. Maybe you need to have a heart-to-heart talk with somebody. Maybe you need to invite one of the guys and the captain and two others to your home for dinner and talk things through, right? But the lessons learned is that there's always another side to every story. You have to listen well. You have to understand the issues at hand. You have to be calm, cool, and collected. You can't talk down to anybody. You want to be understanding, but at the same time, you have to be realistic, right? I mean, did you actually curse at the referee? Well, yeah, maybe, coach, maybe I did, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. And so, you were punished for that. You got a yellow card, or maybe you were even thrown out of the game. So now you have to live with it. And, how can we learn from that experience, and how can we do better? Do you actually know the rules of the game, right? I mean, well, I didn't know that, so, there's an education along the way, but it cannot be overbearing. You can't talk down to them. I mean, it has to be a situation where, even though you're the teacher and they are the pupil, they have to understand that from this particular experience, we can grow together and we can improve and we can live a better life because of the way we were able to sort things out.
Yeah.
Lessons learned for sure. Right. And, Helen and I, in our retirement, continue to coach, right? We run the Colorado College Retiree Club. All the faculty and staff who are retired. We have a physical fitness group. Actually, in an hour from now, we're going to be at our exercise group, right? And there's maybe 25 who come regularly, and 3 times a week, and we do this and that. And, sometimes they think they can't do it, and so well, maybe a little bit of encouragement helps, and so we still have sort of a team to deal with, right? But we're all old farts now, right? And we've got our life behind us. We're just trying to stay alive, right? And maybe make it for another 5, 6, 7 years and enjoy ourselves along the way, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key, enjoyment, love for one another, respect, trust, and socializing along the way that helps us, approach another day. And that's what we're going to do today. But we don't play soccer.
That's probably wise. I don't play soccer at 48 anymore. For that, probably, you never know what might happen.
But it's a good lesson that coaches never really stop coaching. It really is truly about those relationships. And that's what you continue to do, is build those relationships and pour into each other. And that's what community is about. Horst, as we kind of wrap things up, is there anything that you've watched, read, or listened to that's impacted your thinking on how soccer kind of explains life and leadership?
Well, I mean, it's the world's game, right? There are so many lessons to be learned from, investing hard work, persevering on the field, surviving under pressure, coming back from defeat, trying again. For me, an ongoing passion that, I developed early in my life because of my grandfather's involvement in the game and, just the association with wonderful people who give you as many lessons as you have lessons to offer to them, right? We learn from one another. We go through life and we have this bond through the game that allows us to really become world citizens, through the game and get enjoyment out of it when we watch the incredible artistic ability and choreography of these players and games at the highest level. And, we carry on because of these encounters. And, to compliment you two engaging in these kind of conversations for educational use for our fellow coaches, our fraternity and sorority that we have built over time out there. The message for the coaches is, carry on, let the kids play, give them creative opportunities. Don't blow the whistle too often. Just let them do their thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Horst. And I know every time I talk with you, you are a student of history, reading a lot of history books and just seeing how, really teams in history, that's how things get done, right? Is through teams and watching soccer, it's no exception, right? Is just to see these team sports are really a microcosm of the teamwork that needs to happen in the world to really get things done in ways. And so that's something I just appreciate you. Thank you so much for your friendship. I mean, first of all, but also just for coming on today and being a part of this conversation. Thanks so much, Horst.
Carry on the good work.
All right, folks. Well, thanks again for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for this download. Thank you for all that you're doing out there. Hopefully taking everything that you're learning from this show and using it in your leadership, using it in your own coaching. All the stuff we talked about on the show will be in the show notes. You can find that at howsoccerexplainsleadership.com/Horst Richardson. You can find the book. We'll have a link to that. We'll have a link to the Warrior Way stuff, the Coaching the Bigger Game stuff. All of those things that we're doing, you can see there. As always, please take all that you're learning from this show and use it to help you be a better spouse, a better parent, a better coach, a better leader in all that you do, and continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.